Hello everyone. So we are finally live, and this time we are going completely different kind of preparation. So first what we are going to do is simple. We'll take the topic from the British literature and then we'll move forward. Along with that, what we are going to do, we are taking all the questions that they have asked previously, and we are taking all the questions one by one, and then we'll understand what kind of trends is going on right now. So preparing a lot, you know like so many things, you don't know which topic and which particular author or works are important, and this time we are going to find out about this particular stuff. So first of all, I would like to know if you can hear me correctly, if the voice is coming you know correctly, and the text that you can see over your screen, that if you can see it properly. So let me know if anyone is there. I can see there is no one right now. One person is there, and don't know who is that. If you say hi in the comment box, I will know, and then we'll move forward. So anyway, this is the first class, and it's kind of short notice that I have given in the groups and all. So this is our first live, as I told you, and there might be some technical issue, but what I did is I have just got all the microphone I have already, and proper light is there, and of course text is on your screen, and you can also see me there, right? So if you want me to start right now, you can just say start in the comment box. And anyway, whatever the doubts you come along, you just have to type there, and I'll be there to answer. And this time these live classes are going to be very important, because what we are doing is taking all the question that they have asked previously. I have collected like mountains of questions, and I explained them. And as you know, we have also cracking net series, that book that we have like 7 volumes there. 6 volume already published, seventh is on the way. So we are taking all the questions from there, but this time we have arranged all that in a particular order. Like here in module 1, we are going to discuss Greco-Roman period, and in that we have collected all the questions that they have asked previously on Greco-Roman period, or their author, or the works. So everything is there, and let's begin. I won't. Maybe from tomorrow there will be many people will be joining, and as you know, it's the first session on this particular course, and along the way people will get, if they find it good, they can do. And what you can do, one more thing, if you haven't subscribed the channel, you can just subscribe it now, because we are going to we're going live every single day, and every single day there will be a series in order, so that you can, for that you can follow our channel. So anyway, let's get started. I hope it will help you a lot. So let's begin. And of course I have this pen and stuff, and I want to check if it works. But anyway, let's begin. So the first thing you see here on our screen is module 1, and there we are going to discuss from 9th century BC, and we'll move forward till 5th century AD, right? And we'll start with the ancient Greek literature. So all the literature actually began from there. The first were these Greek literature, and they influenced all over Europe. And you can see it in French literature, you can see in Italian, all kind of literature from, they have taken from Greco-Roman period. So basically it began from Greco-Roman period, and we are going to start the first point. So As I told you one more, as I told you before, and I'm gonna mention one more time, that we are not going to, you know, study in very depth. We are going whatever they have asked in your exam and in correct order. So let's begin. First, let me fix this thing, this pad. I hope it'll work. Yes. So first module we are going to cover from 9th century to 5th century AD. Right. So first is their influence. So basically this thing, ancient Greek literature shaped what Roman literature and other European culture for centuries. And regions of these literary activities were especially Greece, then Ionia, then Aegean, then Sicily. We have southern Italy. So all this influence you can see all over these places or countries, right? And then Greek literary tradition were preserved through Byzantine Empire and epic foundation. As we know that Greek literature major poets were Homer, and his work, the Iliad and the Odyssey, and which is set in the Mycenaean era. Then we have Hesiod, and Hesiod key work include theogony, Greek mythology, and works and days. Very important, and we'll move forward one by one. Anyway, I just want to give you what we are going to study. And in Greek literature, there are three major periods, which start with Archaic period, which is from 800 to 479 BCE. And in this period, basically what it was focused on mythology, folklore, and oral tradition. And in that period, who were the key figures? They were Homer. So Homer, and Homer's work were uh, Iliad and Odyssey, and Hesiod, Theogony, works and days. These works are important. And then after that archaic period, we had classical period, and in that classical period, we know the dates here: 500 to 323 BC. And why it is important? Because of the tragedy, rise of tragedy, again with comedy and philosophical writing, where you see we had Aristophanes, Sophocles, Euripides, and Aeschylus. After that, there is another period which is Hellenistic period. In that, mostly who were there? Romans, and expansion of Greek influence into Roman literature. And we have Roman writers like Virgil, Horace, and Ovid, and they ask question based on that sometime, not always, but sometime. And what question they have asked in 5 years, we have there. So stick and let's move forward. So again, let's talk about Homer first. So Homer, as we know, 8th century, and key works of Homer, as we know, the Iliad, important thing, how many lines are there? 15,693 lines. And it focused on what? Final week. Remember, only 7 days of the war is predicted. Of the what? Trojan War. And key conflict was what? Agamemnon versus Achilles, right? And what happens in that final week? Hector kills Patroclus, and Achilles what? Avenges him by killing Hector. And the themes were simple: honor, heroism, revenge, and divine intervention. Then we have Odyssey, and as we know, Odyssey has 4 books, and what it follows: Odyssey's 10 years of journey back to Ithaca after the Trojan War, right? And key characters were Penelope, which was a wife of Odysseus, and his son Telemachus. and who fend off suitors in his absence. Another was Calypso, which actually imprisons Odysseus on the island of Ogygias. They didn't ask question, but you should know what happens in Odyssey, right? And themes again: adventure, loyalty, cunning, and preservance. Homeric tradition. Homer is, as we know, is the greatest poet of the ancient world. So let's see how many of you are there. Do you have any doubt? You can just mention in the comment box. But anyway, let's move forward. Now we'll talk about Hesiod, right? And Hesiod is what he was active on 750 to 650 BC. I hope you can see all the text here. And about the poet, little bit about the poet, he was actually contemporary of Homer, and as we know, he was active between 750 to here 650 BC. And again, his primary sources were Greek mythology, farming technique, and early economics and astronomy. His key works, Theogony, which has this much line, 1022 lines, and what it explores, what origin of gods, and its central narrative is the rise of Zeus and Cronus, and of course the Titans, and it introduces what key myths like Pandora and Zeus bedevil mankind. And his another important work is Works and Days, which has 822 lines. And it is a detective poem offering advice on what agriculture, and it instructs Hesiod's brother Peresis on hard work and justice. And it describes what the five ages of man, which starts with golden, silver, bronze, heroic, and iron. Right. And another work of his is Shield of Heracles, and it attributed to Hesiod but considered what spurious, likely written in what 6th century BC, and it describes what Heracles says adventure. And legacy is what contrast with Homer's more heroic views of the world, offering severe and realistic portrayal of life. And his another important work is, as we know, Theogony, which focuses on divine power that we have discussed in the beginning, right? And it, you know, also while Works and Days emphasize the labor and hardship of human existence. And in Greco-Roman period, now we'll move to 9th to 5th century BC, and what happens here is very, you know, important thing, take place here is the Greek theater, especially the tragedies. So as you can see over our screen, we have everything in bold. And why we have put bold there? Because it's important point, and also what they have asked previously. And when you just prepare this note, you will be able to answer the question. And we have also collected like 40 questions from the PYQ that we'll discuss. We will discuss in this class, and also if because the class is for 1 hour, and then we'll move to the next. If we are not able to complete today, we'll just take another class. And of course, for the schedule and other stuff, for the timing of the live classes, that will inform, and it will also be there in our app. But anyway, let's move to Greek theater. So Greek theater, 550 BC to 220 BC, and origin developed as a part of festival. Very important word, Dionysia, that you have to remember. right? An integral part of the Greek culture were what? Tragedy, comedy, and satire plays. We'll talk about it, who's important in tragedy and who's important in comedy and satire plays. So first, very important, Aeschylus, and they have asked actually question on Aeschylus. What they have asked, not about the father of the tragedy, but very important that he was known as the father of tragedy. And why they have asked? Because of this thing. What? Second actor, right? You should remember that. Expanding dramatic possibilities. And his key works, as we know, is Prometheus Bound, and we have Oressia. They have asked question on that. What was the question? They have asked about the trilogy. What plays are there in Oressia trilogy? And it was Agamemnon and the Libation Bearer and the Humanities. So that you have to remember all these three works. And of course, it talks about justice and revenge. And second important playwright in Greek literature on Greek tragedy was what? Sophocles. Very important. And he added, and why he is important, about of course Oedipus Rex, but also he added third actor, very important, and for more complex interaction between characters. He actually wrote more than 100 plays, in total 123, but 7 of which have survived. And in that we have to know what is this play, Oedipus the King or Oedipus Rex. Most of you know the story, but we'll have separate class in most important text, and which will be Oedipus the Rex. We are also going to talk about Antigone, and we're going to talk about Electra also. And Antigone, as you know, it explores the theme of a state of law versus moral law. And Electra, Ajax, Philoctetes, and the women of Trachis. So these are there. We have Euripides, another tragedy writer, and who was active again in the same time, 484 to 407. But what is important is all his play, Medea and Alcestis, these two words. Very important is this one that you have to remember, and we'll talk about that too. Right, and next important thing is Greek comedy. And in Greek comedy, we have three things: old, then we have middle, and new comedy. You have to know old, and then you have to know new comedy. As you know, it's Menander, old comedy, Aristophanes, right? That we'll talk about. So, old comedy first. As we know, flourished between 5th and 4th century and known for satirical and obscene nature. So for that kind of trend they have started, and who was it? Aristophanes. Very well known for old comedy. When we talk about old comedy, one name is very important, Aristophanes, and they have asked question based on him also before. I'm not talking about in 5 years, but before they have asked. In 5 years they didn't ask much about it. They have asked one question always, which is the cloud, because he criticizes the Greek philosophy and the philosopher. And who was it? Socrates. He criticized about it. That's why this particular work is important. They have asked question based on that. Then first we have knights. So recently, one question they have asked about the knights, the clouds, the wasp, and the frogs. All four work they have asked. That's why this is important. You don't have to know the story, you have to know what it is about. So the knight is about Athenian leader Cleon. As you know, so many works in tragedy, Cleon features, right? This particular character. Most of in Antigone he is there, of course in Oedipus Rex he is there, but this time as a comedy, remember. So knights is important. And the clouds, very important work. Not only once, they have asked twice about that. So Socrates, he criticizes Socrates. So in previous year, uh, I think it was in December last year, 2023, they asked what is about the clouds. They didn't particular ask about Socrates, but they have asked like, Greek philosopher. So it was criticism on Greek philosopher, especially Socrates. Very important point that you have to remember. Then we have the wasp. Wasp is also important because it is about the jury system of Athenian, right? That you have to know. A satire on Athenian jury system. You'll get question. And then the frogs. And frogs, why it is important? Because takes on the god of Dionysia. And it is descending to the underworld to bring back a poet. That is very important, that you have to remember all these four names is quite important because they have asked question recently. So in that case, this particular these works are quite important. Then we have middle comedy. So when we talk about middle comedy, it's a kind of extended version of old comedy, but not important. Only one was there, like Athenius of New Crates documented much of what is known about this period. Not much, you don't get any comedy there, any work, but it's still there. And the final one is the new comedy. And who is important new comedy? Uh, Wait a minute. Yes. 4th century BC, and Menander is important, and they didn't ask much about his work. They have asked only who in the match the following. Aristophanes they asked about old comedy. Menander asked new comedy. So remember that he's a new comedy. So now let's move to Aeschylus. And Aeschylus, as you know, is the father of tragedy. Remember the date 525, 456. Key contribution what? As we earlier discussed, second actor, right? And very important work is Prometheus Bound. Remember, punishment of Prometheus of giving what? Fire to who? To a human. Very important that you have to remember. It is about what? A rebellion against what? A divine. And then we have Orestia. Most of the time they have asked question. And Prometheus Bound, we have so many poems, these later they all poets have, have taken. So the next is Orestia, very important, the only surviving ancient Greek trilogy. And what is important? Name Agamemnon, the libation bearer, and the Eumenides. Another name of this is what? Agamemnon is the same. And what happens there when Agamemnon returns from the Trojan War and his, you know, murdered by who? Clytemnestra, very important. And the libation bearer, what? It follows Orestes and his sister Electra as they avenge their father's death by killing who? Clytemnestra. And Eumenides again centers on a trial of Orestes, who is what? Pursued by Furies for matricide. And the trilogy ends with the establishment of Athenian justice system, moving from vendetta to legal justice. Award and legacy, as you know, Aeschylus won first prize at Dionysia festival multiple times, including victories in 484 BC, 72 and 64. And known for what? Exploring profound themes of fate, guilt, revenge, and other stuff. Then we have Sophocles, and Sophocles we'll discuss later in our special dedicated lecture on Oedipus Rex and Antigone, because the plot is important for this because they ask question. Right. So let's just go briefly about Sophocles. As you know, he's the master of tragedy, and key contributor is what you should know. He introduced the third actor, and again, it's the same kind of you know themes are there like justice, morality, fate, and also revenge. Then major work is Oedipus the King, as we know, we'll discuss later. As we know, it is the greatest tragedies ever written. Central theme again, it was about fate, and plot is what Oedipus the king, who was king of Thebes, unknowingly what kills his father and marries his mother, fulfilling a prophecy he tried to avoid. Simple plot that we'll discuss in our extended lecture. Next is Antigone. Again, it is about the conflict between individual and state law. Of course, we'll talk about this in detail. And plot is simple. Antigone, who is Oedipus's daughter and defies the king's order and buries her brother, leading the tragic consequences. Next is Electra, which is simple. Electra and her brother Orestes seek avenge the murder of their father Agamemnon. Ajax focus on the tragic downfall of hero of Ajax, who is dishonored after Trojan War. Again, next work is Philoctetes, and that is what it is about suffering and loyalty. Plot is simple. Philoctetes abandoned by what Greeks due to an incurable wound is out after years later when they need his help to win the Trojan War. The Woman of Trachis and Oedipus at Colonus. So these are the work. Next is Euripides. Euripides is important for one thing, which is Medea. Plot simple. Abandoned by her husband Jason, takes revenge by killing his new wife and their own children. So that is Medea. Simple plot in one line, you have whole plot here, right? Another work is Alcestis, and that is, you only remember the name, but I'll tell you the plot also. So this central character sacrifices her life to save her husband Admetus. So you can just remember in other media what happened. Wife kills husband, his wife and their own children, and here ulta happens, right? Opposite. So here what happened, she saves her husband Admetus, and but is later rescued from underworld by Heracles. Another work is this, the Bacchae, and what happens, this plot is, it focuses on the conflict between Pentheus, the king of Thebes, and the god Dionysus. Right, themes are religious fervor, divine punishment, and order of chaos. Another work is Hippolytus, Electra, and the Trojan women. So if you know the story, so what when we talk about Sophocles' Oedipus the Rex, we'll also talk about Antigone and Electra. In that way, you will understand whole Greek, you know, tragedies, what happens between them, and there are so many when you know the characters, because you know you should not focus that which character is there in which play, because most of the characters are in kind of every single place. So there is not particular way to kind of categorize them. The character is the same in kind of every play, but the plots are different, that we'll talk about. So don't think about that they'll ask about the characters, they will ask about maybe the plots, or match the following, which author wrote, which playwright wrote particular tragedy. So that was all about. Another, we have Aristophanes, as we know, the father of comedy. You should know all the work that I have discussed before. First one is, first you should remember that he's the father of old comedy. Works the Knights what? About Cleon, Athenian leader. It's just what? Attack on. Then we have Clouds, which is very important. Socrates and the rise of philosophy and sophistry in Athens. Wasp is again about Athenian jury system. It pokes fun at the Athenian jury system. And the frogs, what it is about, the god Dionysius descends to the underworld to bring back a great poet to save Athens. That is also a kind of satire. And then at the end we have Lysistrata. Very, a good plot that you should actually know. So Lysistrata organizes a group of women of withhold sexual privilege from their husbands to force them, to end it. So they kind of, go in kind of lynching. So that is also. And why they did it? Because to stop this Peloponnesian war. Very important. So now you know kind of all the important playwright and their work. Very simple, in one line. You don't have to read their full big plots. What they have asked, this thing, right? So not so much notes, we can finish quickly now. And now we'll talk about Pindar. Pindar is important for his what? He is known for lyric poet, and work is Epinitia. And his 17 books are divided into categories like this: dithyrambs, prosodia, parthenicia, and hyperchemetra. These Greek names are very difficult to pronounce, right? And he is famous for his 44 choral victory songs. And for the Greek philosophy that we are going to discuss is Socrates. Socrates we can discuss now. Plato and Aristotle will have a separate session, and Aristotle will come into what? Criticism. So uh, Aristotle will move there, right? And Plato and Socrates will discuss right now. So Socrates, remember the date, 469 399 BCE, and known as the father of Western philosophy. And he focused on ethics and the pursuit of knowledge through dialogues. Socratic method is what? Engaging in dialogue to stimulate critical thinking and expose contradiction in ideas. Plato, very important figure, student of Socrates and the founder of academy in Athens. The name is itself an academy. Key ideas: what he had found, the theory of forms. He talked about his philosophy in Republic, all about justice, ideal governance, and philosopher, and all this philosopher king, right? And allegory of the cave, he talked about it. So we'll also have discussion on Plato, and in the separate section about Republic, right? That will move in our Aristotle. Again we'll move to the, for this, in criticism part, where we'll discuss poetics, every single thing, because every time they ask question from poetics, right? And we'll also discuss all this in our PYQ session. So let's get started our what? That's what you have been waiting for. So now you know what is Greco-Roman period. You see, in one class everything is finished. You don't have to waste a lot of time in, you know to read all these stuff. You have a small notes what they have asked before. I am talking about 15 years. They have been asking only these things, not more than that. Right. For the Oedipus Rex question that we'll discuss in that particular lecture. So I'll give you like 1 minute break and I'll try to interact with you, and then we'll move to the questions. Okay, I see one comment. Definitely. So now the real, class will begin, because we are going to talk about all the questions they have asked previously on Greco-Roman period. So let's begin. Where is that? Yes. So the first question they have asked about these, you know, combination of the following. So these things. What is a spondy, fire, amphi? Which one is correct? These things. So none of the above. It was kind of dropped question. So what is a spondy? Spondy is a metrical food consisting of two long syllable. What happened? Two long syllable. That is spondy. And what is perhic is what? Too short or unaccented. So we represent as dot. Short or, remember that. Spondy too long, fiery too short. And amphinacer is one a metrical food consisting of two, between two long, one small. So this is the form of amphinacer. Then we have chorioembus. And what is chorioembus? Chorioembus is what? Four syllable it has. The first and last are long. The first and last are long. And the other is shorts. Then we have choria, stretcho, and all whatever is in between. So remember two at the long. Then we have trochaic. And what is trochaic? It's poetic meter and modern linguistic. A trochee. A trochee is what? Or trochee. Metrical food consisting of stressed means that long followed by small. This is the formula that when you make a note, you just have to make these signs, then you will remember. Then we have iamb. And what is iamb? Iamb is troche, opposite of trochee. And how you can, write this? A short, a small, and then the long. This is its figure. Then we have anapest. Anapest is what? Anapest consists two short syllable. So this is this figure, two short, right, and followed by one long. So this is its figure. Then we have dactyl, which means it's talking about a long syllable, sorry, a long syllable followed by two short. So opposite of anapest. That's how you can remember. So through these figures you will remember. Then we have foot. Foot is simple, a metrical syllabic meter, right? And then we have free verse. Free verse is kind of no rhyme. Anything can come like, can come like this or that or that or that, and no particular order. So that we don't need, right? Tetrameter. Tetrameter means four metrical feet. Then we have pentameter. Pentameter means tetrameter is 4, pentameter is 5. And how it is 5 feet, where a foot is a combination of particular number of unstressed syllable and stressed syllabic depending on the pattern of the feet. So pentameter can be iambic or dactyl, anything. Hexameter is what? Another one is there, it's not in bold, is what? 6 line. So it has 6 lines. It has 5, it has 6. And enjambment is what? Enjambment is kind of incomplete syntax at the end of a line. So meaning runs over. So one poetic line to the next without any punctuation. So that is what enjambment. Then we have a pause, which is caesura. And what is that? Is a metrical pause. Right, kind of break. So that is all about the metrical form. Now the second question is asking about, see, I told you about they have asked the question from Aristophanes, right? If you match the following, we talked about clouds is about what? Criticism on philosophical, right? Then government by women, right? And wasp is what? Just wait a minute, something is coming. Let it go. And wasp is about an attack on demigoddess. We talked about, right, attack on a god Dionysia. So that was there. What is Acarnians is attack on parties involved into the war. So simple. If you know one, like if you know about B, like it was attack on philosophy. So B ka 3 means where is in two places. So there might be two option. So throw it. And if you know the another one, Lysistrata C1 here only. So you will easily correct it. We've already discussed about it. These are full notes. Arcanian, the play is a satire on the parties involved into war, particular on the Athenian general and statesman Cleon. Very important explanation is there, and that was kind of, highlights of our course. And then we have clouds. Clouds, as we know, it is about attack on Aristophanes. And one more important thing, that it was a satire on spirit of philosophical inquiry. Very important word and line that they have asked previously. We have Lysistrata, which is again it's a kind of funny comedy. It was about what? Peloponnesian War. Remember that Peloponnesian War. What? They go on a strike, and that's to avoid what? Peloponnesian War. So it has a kind of commentary on futility of war and the power of women in society. Wasp is a comedy about what? Demigod. And who was there? The play criticized the corrupt practice of court and the manipulation of masses by demagogus, whoever he was. The next question is, which constitutes the only extant trilogy from an ancient Greek tragedy? So when we solve all these kind of questions, we know the trends, what kind of topic they have asked, and based on that you should make notes. So here what we have so many questions based on the section, right? So this question, what extended trilogy from ancient Greek? We already talked about it: Agamemnon, Theophori, and the Eumenides. So this one is the light bearer. Remember that. This is the other name. They ask like that. Sometimes they ask English name, sometimes they ask Greek name. Okay. So that is the explanation also. Agamemnon, Theophori, also known as the libation bearer, and the Eumenides, also known as the Furies. Next question. Again, it was about Pindar, Menander, Sappho, Aristophanes. Again, very simple, right? We talked about Menander, that it was new comedy, Aristophanes old comedy, and Pindar we talked about lyric poet, and Sappho Epinephrine. Very easy to answer when you know what kind of question they ask. So you don't have to go and read a big history, you know, book of literature and all this stuff. Just particular to the points note, and that will be enough for you. You don't have to go anywhere. Based on that, we will also at the end of the class we will make last minute revision, so you don't have to make notes also. I'll give you that thing that you can revise even the whole literature in 3 days. It takes only 6 hours to complete the whole revision. For that we have book also. So every week, if you just spend some time in revision, it will be like piece of cake to qualify in it, right? So that's the question. Based on that, we have the option. This correct explanation is simple. Menander, as we know, new comedy, old comedy. Aristophanes. Sappho is known for lyric poet. Lyric no, where is it? Sappho is known lyric poetry written in snag. A little bit here or something, because lyric poet was who? Pindar. Sappho was also lyric poet for Epinephrine. Very important that you should know. So simple, the victory of Ode of Epinephrine celebrated athletic victories and was performed by who? Pindar in ancient Greek. While it may seem paradoxical to create art for, these are the texts that I have found somewhere, which includes every single, you know, author here. Aristophanes was the writer of foremost writer of old comedy, and Menander was famous for what? Most famous exponent of the new comedy. So I hope this is helping you. Let me go back and see who else are there. Okay. So I hope you are liking the class. I think we have already crossed 1 hour. We'll discuss a little bit more. Actually, we'll try to finish this, PYQs, and then we'll move tomorrow for what? The major text. And what are these? First is we have Oedipus the Rex, second is Antigone, and third we'll talk about one more play, Aeschylus. All play we'll talk about. I mean, two important one, and then we'll also talk about Plato. We'll talk about Aristotle's, uh, theory of especially poetics. We'll talk about it. Everything will be there, right? So the next question is talking about who is the writer, right? You see, who is the writer of the flies, an adaptation of the Electra myth. So when we talk about Electra myth, and the flies is what? A play by Jean-Paul Sartre and first produced in 1943. So see, sometime they ask question based on modern writer who adapted from Greco-Roman period. So that is also important. That's why we have, included this question as well, right? So it is an adaptation well known of Electra myth, previously explored by not particular one, I mean a writer, playwright, but also all have written about Electra. So this is very important. And the play usually what is the story of Orestes by and his sister Electra as they seek vengeance murder of their father Agamemnon, the former king of Argos, who was killed, their mother Clytemnestra, and her lover Aegisthus, who had usurped the throne. See, very important explanation. You can get this book. If you want this book, you can just write, in the comment. I will provide the link for the printed material you'll get. If you want PDF, we'll have ebooks also that you can get in Amazon, you know, books. Then we have which of these art of Aeschylus, in a part. So which of these are parts of Aeschylus or STA trilogy? Again, they have asked the question, as we know. Agamemnon, the libation bearer, and what was the third one? Two. I mean, this is talking about two. So we have these two, A and B. Answer is A and B. Simple, right? Very. Then we have which of these are plays written by Bertolt Brecht, and why he's here? Because of Copernicus. Also important, and also Archimedes. So A, B, and E are the work. We don't have to go detail because it's not related to us, but there is mentioning of Greek. That's why we have put it here. List of work that, if you want to know more about it, you'll get it in the notes. Right, and I was talking about why I have put it because of the Copernicus, a Renaissance astronomer, and Archimedes were ancient Greek mathematician, physicist, and also engineer. Question number 8. It's talking about blood, yellow bile, phlegm, black bile. What are these things? So these represent particular, emotions, and where it was discussed, these are four temperaments of humors in ancient Greek and Roman medicine, and later in medieval and early modern European, each temperament was associated with particular bodily fluid and was believed to influence a person's personality and health. The four temperament, as we know, is phlegmatic, which is and associated with what? Phlegm, which is mucus. Right, simple. C1. Through the name, even you can understand. C1. Where is that? C1, right? This one. Then we have sanguine. And what is sanguine is related to blood. So this. Then we have melancholy, which is related to which color? Black bile. That is called black bile. Melancholy. Then we have, choleric, and choleric is yellow bile. So all these things are there here. You see, these are very important because it was in Greek and Roman medicine. Right. Who among the following translated Aristotle's Poetics in Latin? Not in English, it's in Latin. Who? Do you know any one of these name? So our answer is Giorgio Valla. Explanation is there. Giorgio Valla's 1498 Latin translation of Aristotle's text was the first to be published, was included with the 1508 Aldine printing of the Greek original as a part of an anthology of rhetorics and Graeci. Right. And then Aristotle work, aesthetic consists, as we know, it is about poetic. We'll talk about in detail in our literary criticism. And the scholar who published significantly in commentaries on Aristotle Poetics included Avicenna, Al-Farabi, and Averroes. Oh, very difficult names. Anyway, I won't be able to remember because we don't need it. We need what? Latin, English. Who translated in Latin, who translated in English, that I have mentioned here. So Thomas Twining, 1789, English, and Valen Iohens, 1885, Latin. Ingram Bywater, that we know, is English, and Rostaghi Augusto in Italian. Okay. So what does Aristotle mean by the phrase language with pleasurable accessories? What does it mean? It means a language full of pompous vocabulary, and he also talks about what and embellished language. And what are these? Let me tell you here. So the language, rhyme and melody for Aristotle make up the matter of poetic creation, where the epic poem uses language alone. The playing of the aya involves a rhythm and melody. Some poetic forms blend all materials. For example, Greek tragedy drama included a singing chorus. So music, language were all part of these things. Next question is, what did Matthew Arnold imply by the term hybrism? As we know, it means seriousness, right? And what is the answer here? Moral education. So hybrism means moral education. That is our answer. And why I have mentioned it? Because you see, Hellenism. In his book Culture and Anarchy, Arnold used the term hybrism to refer what moral and ethical values of the Hebrew people as expressed in the Old Testament of Bible. Right, moral righteousness. Remember the word, these two together. And close kind of explanation if you want. It's a Hebraism. In his book Culture and Anarchy, means was a system of moral education that emphasized the importance of personal responsibility, duty, and self-discipline. Anyway, we'll talk about these things in Matthew Arnold section, but why we have put it? Because of the question and especially the word Hebraism. Right. Beside being a playwright, who among the following has translated Homer? Everybody knows, and it's kind of easy question to answer. George Chapman. George Chapman was associated with translation of Homer. That is very important that you have to remember. Right. And then, which of the following are Plato's main objection against poetry? So if you have read Plato, you will know. Till now we haven't read Plato right now, but we know basic things. We will, of course, in our section of criticism, we'll talk about Plato as well. So the poet is an imitator. Of course, he talked about it, right? The poet is incapable of bravery. That we are not sure. So we'll just move it. The poet, by fueling passions and emotions, weakens the reasoning capacity of the citizen. So first thing you should know, Plato is remembered for poetry. Why? Do you know that? For the criticism of poetry. He's not supporting poetry, he's against it. So it's kind of Plato versus poetry. So this duel was happening, and what kind of claim he made? That poet is an imitator, right? And the poet, what, by fueling passions and emotions, these things what weakens humans. So kind of, if there is a poet, right, he's an imitator and he's very weak. Poetry makes weak. And the poet has no knowledge of the world, so he's a kind of illiterate according to him, right? So that is also important. So these weakness, and also he talked about that poetry is what? Mother of lies. Very important that net ask, right? The poet is less responsible. There is another option that will see what happens here. So Plato attacked poetry along with other forms of what he called mimesis. So this word is also important. And according to Plato's theory of mimesis or imitation, the arts deal with illusion, which is imitations of an imitation. And what else he said? We have all these things that we'll discuss in our session. And to sum it up, in short, all these things, these big notes, I have put it in small, which is Plato what? Compose under not by using reason. Poetry is ignorant. So he's talking about poets. Poets usually, what did they do? They compose under inspiration, not original. So that's why it is what? Mimesis, or I don't know how to write, imitation. Imitation. I hope this time it's going better. And poetry is ignorant what it teaches, and thus teaches the wrong things. And poetry is mimesis, imitation, and what? Not one time imitation, but two, removes from the really real. That is the form of poetry. Encourages the wrong emotions in the audience, and poetry is tossed out of the republic but win a challenge. Plato has raised the question of why a representation of people suffering are a pleasurable experience. He also talked about a couple of more things, like ancient quarrel between poetry and philosophy. That trend was already happening right before poetry versus philosophy, all these things. And then Emblem by Francis Quarrel is what? A commentary on biblical illustration. And Emblem, as we know, it's a work by Francis Quarles, who was an English poet and writer who lived in 17th century. So the illustration in Emblem is a mix of biblical scene, allegorical figure, and moral lesson. Okay, the next, who among the following was talked about? If this word comes, high seriousness, you should immediately know it is about Matthew Arnold, right? It is about Arnold. And there itself, he talked about hyperism and all this stuff. So, high seriousness, poet and quotes John Milton to prove the same. And what was the quote? That will also see. So, it was C only. It was Matthew Arnold that who talked about high seriousness. And what, where he talked about it? In the study of poetry, English criticism. And why we have put this high seriousness? You should know that it is about Homer. He have mentioned Homer, Shakespeare, Milton. They are from high seriousness. And he excluded what? There was a question also that ki, which poet he didn't include, and it was Chaucer was not in the category of high seriousness. Very important. So these notes are, will give you, really kind of idea that what kind of trends, are going on in UGC net. You will get it perfectly. You will know what kind of question might come and what kind of topics are important. So in that case, this learning through PYQ is important. And Virginia Woolf's Orlando opens 1588 in Orlando. That is not about very important, but why about the oak tree? This option we have put it because here also they talk about opening Virginia. No, here, yes, Homer and Virgil. The word is there. Not important for going. Okay, who was Milton's model when he recast the first edition? It is first. I'll just first. We'll add it later. So Paradise Lost in 10 books of 12th book. So Milton's model when he recast the first edition. Who was the model in the beginning? As we know, when you read the first text, you will understand he's modeling Virgil. So that's why this particular question is important here. So they ask question from Greco-Roman, but not directly, but indirectly. So they can cover two period at the same time. I hope you get the idea what I'm trying to say, right? Uh, Next we have match the following. Again, it is about why we have put it, because of translation of Agamemnon. And who was the guy who translated? I think W.H. Auden. Let's see who. Translation of answer is C1 W.H. Auden. So other explanation is there. At Repton, his boarding school, Derbysh. We just have to focus on this thing. The Agamemnon of Aeschylus is translated by Louis Macnies. Very important. And the translation of Agamemnon, another was, this is the Agamemnon of Aeschylus. Another is the Agamemnon translation of Agamemnon, which was W.B. W.H. Auden. So very important. So again, they have asked one more time this question, right? We are now getting 3 times the same question about, you know, from the tragedy. In which of these two plays does the blind seer Tiresias appear? So Tiresias is another important character in Greek, tragedy. He always talks about what? The fate. And he actually kind of spills the beans for us in the beginning of the play, that this guy will kill his father and marry his mother and then produce children. So these things he tells the plot in the beginning, and the character kind of try to avoid that and then end up whatever he said. So that is sheer, as we know. In one is there Oedipus the king and Antigone. So both plays has this character Tiresias. So in Tiresias, in the play Oedipus the Rex and Antigone by Sophocles. In Oedipus Rex, what he does? Tiresias, called upon by King Oedipus to reveal the truth of plague that has befallen the city. He actually wants, you should not actually force me to tell you the fate, the reason. But he actually reluctantly reveals that Oedipus himself is the cause of the plague, and that he is unknowingly responsible for committing a heinous crime. And in Antigone, what happened? Tiresias appears to deliver a prophetic warning to King Creon again, advising him to change his course of action and avoid the disastrous consequences of his stubbornness. Another question: which among the following was not recognized as major dialogue of poet? So in dialogue, we know there is symposium, right? There is Phaedro, there is Crito, but metaphysics was not there. So that is, it is asking nice. My laptop in charge. Yes, we're back. The Crito, let's a little bit talk about it. Metaphysics is what associated with Aristotle, not Plato. And Crito is a dialogue by Plato featuring Socrates. In every single, in Plato's dialogue, Socrates is the main character, and he's always arguing with Crito's, and other people. And then we have Phaedro. Phaedro is Plato's dialogue focusing on the immortality of soul, said during Socrates' final hours. Symposium is what? Plato's text depicting banquet where notable individuals including Socrates, Alcibiades, Aristophanes engaging in what? Impromptu speeches praising Eros, the god of love and desire. What does Aristotle mean by the phrase language with pleasurable accessories? Again, this question we have discussed in the beginning. And who among the following believed that poetry was only an imitation of an imitation and therefore trivial? We talked about, right? He imitates twice. Poet twice, right? Imitates. And who told it? Plato. Very easy. The real explanation is here. Poetry was considered only an imitation of reality. So it was, copy of reality. Not one copy, but twice, which removed the reality, right? So that was it. The two broad division of reality in Plato's theory of reality was what? So that is also important. He talked about what? Visible and intelligence. Theory of reality. We are talking about theory of reality. Remember, these questions they have asked in net. So the visible realm, also known as the world appearance, is the physical world perceived by our senses. So anyway, you should know that theory of reality is by Plato. We'll anyway discuss there in our criticism section. Next question is, who among the following refutes Plato's charge that poets are liar by arguing that the poet nothing affirms and therefore never lies? So who replied Plato? If you recall, in Renaissance it was Philip Sidney, right? Very easy to answer. So Philip Sidney, in his work The Defense of Poesy, actually, you know talked about Plato's charge that poets are liar. He argues that poets do not aim to present actual truth, but rather to explore universal truth and convey moral lessons through their art. So, according to Sidney, poets use imagination and function to create a heightened reality that can reveal deeper insight into human nature and the world. Right. So that was the answer. So which two of the following poets defended poetry against Plato's, kind of denigration of poetry? So who actually defended poetry against Plato? Tell me which of the two poets. One, we know Philip Sidney. So if it is in the answer, you can just put D is where in only one place. So you can just put. And the second was P.B. Shelley. And why P.B. Shelley? You might not know. I'll tell you what he said. So first, it was P.B. Shelley. Both Shelley and Sidney wrote influencer work that argued for value. So, as you know, the same name they have, right? Shelley's A Defense of Poesy and Sidney's The Apology of Poetry. They countered Plato's criticism and championed the importance of poetry in human culture and society. Right. Then again, there was one question from this passage because of Plato's. So, poetry as mania, one of the Plato's two higher forms of divine mania. So, this text is kind of different. So, if you read it, the question will be passage described as Plato's two higher form of divine madness. So, when you read it, you'll get that it's love. Again, identify the correct identify the correct option in Julia Kristeva definition of Khora. So when this word Khora comes, remember this was actually by who in the beginning? It was Plato himself who introduced this Khora concept, which is what this is third kind. And describing it as a formless space of interval, you know, that acts as a receptacle of matrix for form. So this, so you should remember Khora, who all are associated with Khora. One is Plato, second is of course our Julia Kristeva. I know you you cannot recognize the handwriting, but when as I move, it'll improve, right? Another was there, was Bakhtin, as far as I know. Will anyway know more about it. Bakhtin. Then, which among the following are not true about the defense of poesy by Philip Sidney? Why Philip Sidney's defense of poesy is coming? Because it's, you know, because of Plato actually. So simple. Why we have put it? Because of this thing. So the text defends Plato for his. So he didn't actually defend. He what? He was against it, right? Against the Plato's statements. The question is are not true. So this is not true. Actually, not defend but refute. Hmm. So first is right because 2 is not right here. E and C also. So why C? Philip Sidney criticizes Geoffrey Chaucer's Troilus and Cressides in Spenser's The Shepherd's Calendar. He actually not criticizes it, but championed it. I'll tell you more. Correct statement is it was published in 1595, also titled as this, and the text is the first major piece of criticism in English. That is also true, and let me tell you the answer here. Okay. Criticism, true. Sidney's death, partially motivated by critique, as we know. We'll anyway discuss more about this in Renaissance criticism. But for now, what is important is Sidney refused general objection to poetry, including Plato's. That's why. And what statement was that of Plato was that the least liar. It is Philip Sidney who says is the least liar, but Plato says is the mother of lie. Right, poetry. So that was this was the quote from the An Apology for Poetry of the Chaucer. Chaucer undoubtedly did excellently in his Troilus, so he's kind of supporting. He was not against it, right? So further discussion. Sidney states that there have been 3 general kinds of poetry. Very important that you should know. The chief, which is what? Religious and philosophical and imaginative. This question comes. Anyway, this question particularly will discuss in Renaissance criticism. Right now we are focusing on what? Greek and Roman. So, which statement among the following are not relevant to Biographia Literaria? A and E. Robert and E. Aristotle and Plato. Only this question because of this statement. See, they're not asking directly, but they are just interconnecting each other questions. So all about Biographia Literaria, you'll get everything. If you read these notes, you don't have to go and read whole Biographia Literaria. These are the points that net has asked question. So very important, you should get this book. If you don't have, it will kind of broaden your thought and know what kind of question, I mean how good quality questions that they are asking. It might be easy, but the questions are found very kind of very hard work is there to put these questions into your paper. Anyway, so given below are 2 statements. It's about there are 2 statements here. You can see Plato, unlike Plato, Aristotle considered that the poetry at its best requires great skills and also differentiate between good and bad poetry on clear and systematic aesthetic grounds. So that is the first statement. Second, Aristotle accepts Plato's insight that the emotions are important to poetry but rejects Plato's distrust of the emotions. So in that fact, if you just consider both the statement, they are all true. And we have the text also to support this that you can read. See, This is the whole text. I have, I got it from this. This is from Poetics. Very important. And match the list, very easy, that you can do it in a by looking at it. So Philip Sidney, apology, this defense, Aristotle, rhetoric, Plato, symposium, very easy, not even because we have read the notes properly, right? Who defined hamartia as a tragic flaw? Very easy. Who talked about it? Aristotle. We'll talk Aristotle detail in our criticism section, right? Which one of the following statements true about Aristotle? So you see, they are asking so many questions from Poetics. Almost every single time they're asking one question from Aristotle, and sometimes two questions. So Plato and Aristotle kind of comes together. So when they talk about Aristotle, they might mention Plato also. So in that way, they are covering two stuff. And when they talk about Philip Sidney, they are covering Renaissance criticism, also Aristotle and Plato, right? So these things happen. And sometimes they mention Homer, and all these are interrelated to each other. So in that case, it's very important that you should have a little knowledge about Greek literature, and the knowledge which you'll get would be far enough if you read these notes. You can get the books also, or you can just join this course and enjoy. We'll have a lot of everyday discussion. We'll have 5 days classes in a week, 2 days holidays, Saturday, Sunday, and there will be 2 or 3 classes every time. So you see, today we have completed our Greco-Roman period. We not only covered all the notes, but also we have done, we have solved the question paper that they have asked previously. And the label of the question that they're asking. It might be easy, but the questions are really good. And if you just remember all the notes, you will understand. So at the end of this session, I'll also give you the last minute revision stuff that you can go and watch, right? I mean, read, and then this whole lecture will be like in your mind, what you have discussed, what kind of questions you have solved, and everything in the revision section. And I tell you, 6 hours is enough to revise every single thing. And that book I will provide at the end of our course. So right now you'll get the notes after the class. If you have joined this notes that I'm talking about, this notes will be available in the course. After every session, when you click in the section, you will have to download this notes, right? So next time, which one of the following is true about Aristotle's Poetics? So here we're talking about Poetics. So every time they're asking question of focusing of imitation, that is kind of correct. Asserted the value is giving preference to rhetoric over imitation, that is not supporting, right? He asserted the value of poetry by integrating ulta kar diya here, right? Imitation. Value of poetry focusing on both rhetoric but no, he asserted the value of poetry focusing on only imitation and mimesis rather than rhetoric. If it is talking about rhetoric, then we'll have to talk about another one, but that we'll discuss later. Okay. So poetics, it is all about poetics, that we'll know. And one more work is here. Francis Bacon, question. Francis Bacon explained the new logic or inductive method of reasoning. What is its name of the work? Is this. And why? It means new organon. Aristotelian syllogism found in Aristotle, organum. Right. Excuse me. See, so many questions are there. Here, catharsis, Aristotle. You solved the question, right? Sweetness and light, Matthew Arnold. And the individual talent, who? T.S. Eliot. Response to Gerson, Philip Sidney. Easy to answer. if you know one. But anyway, these things again will come where when we talk about Victorian criticism. And Philip Sidney will come when we talk about Renaissance criticism. So, who among the following translated Aristotle Poetics Latin? We also, again, this question came, which was Giorgio Valla. We have already discussed it. Identify the correct pairs. We know Aristotle, not, he didn't write rhetoric. Yes, let me see. Which one is the correct pair? Aristotle is rhetoric. Quintilian is oratorical institution. C. Brooks and R.P. Warren is understanding fiction. Alan Tate, the verbal icon. Harold Bloom, the great tradition, is who? T.S. Eliot, right? T.S. Eliot, I guess. F.R. Lewis, sorry. This is F.R. Lewis. We'll see the explanation when we talk about. So Aristotle's rhetoric is a treatise on art. Quintilian, oratorical institution is guide to education and training of orators in ancient Rome. And this, they have talked about Brooke and Warren in understanding fiction, why we are here, and the great tradition is by F.R. Lewis. And verbal icon is by William K. Vincent and Munro C. Beardsley. Identify the poem termed as pastoral elegy. So when we talk about pastoral elegy, Thyrsis is also come. Because why this option is there, we have discussed about this, right? Thyrsis. So as you know, this Thyrsis. And why another one? Lycidas is also a pastoral elegy, and Memorian is also. Okay. I just want to mention why is this is added here in this question. So now I got the idea. It is because of Lycidas was a Shepherd in Virgil's Eclogue. That's why we have mentioned this question. Then arrange the correct chronological sequence of the publication of the text. So why it is mentioned, caller will show. Okay, this should not be here. Okay, 40. Spencer Shepherd's calendar, published in 1579, was dedicated to who? So when we read this, the Shepherd's calendar, originally titled the Shepherd's calendar, containing 12 proportion of the 12 minutes, and then okay, this also should not be here because it was inspired by Virgil. That's why it's here. And then we have 42, question number 42. Critics, Horace, John Dryden. So Horace, we already talked about it, and Horace is famous for Arc Poetica, right? That's why this question is there. Then which two poems in the following list are odes written in the Horatian manner? So why we have mentioned, because it is Horace manner, and which is written B. Andrew Marvell's upon Cromwell's return, and the C is Alexander Pope Ode to Solitude, Ode on Solitude. Who among the following called the poet star the rhyming friends? The question was Ovid. Actually, the answer was the principal character is indeed Ovid. It is widely recognized by scholar and critic. Okay. So that's all, guys. We are done here. So, as you know, as we were just talking about all these questions, in along with that, we have covered our Greco-Roman. So, what we have studied so far, as you can see over your screen, Greco-Roman, we talked about all the notes here, Greco-Roman, and then we have solved all the questions that you can see here. So that's all. And in our next session, we'll be talking about, we'll move to the Old English literature, and in important text session, we'll talk about Oedipus Rex and couple of more, tragedies. So thank you all, and it was good that we have finally finished the lecture, and I'll come back tomorrow with another live. Okay, we'll try to finish this course as soon as possible. We'll try to cover all aspects of literature. We'll also cover, literary criticism, paper 1 class also will be there. So thank you so much, Bhuwana, that you were there for so long. Means a lot, and we'll be doing. And don't forget to like, if you, I know one or two people I can see that at least you guys can, like. Anyway, from tomorrow, people might join, and as we move forward, it's the beginning, so a little bit problem with the screen also, but later we'll move. Okay, thank you so much, and have a good day. Bye bye.